Ian Harding from ABB will present KNX and DALI lighting control webinar, which is last in our series webinars on KNX. Just to remind, before Ian had the introduction to KNX, then the KNX topology and networks, KNX programming with ETS, and today we're going to talk about KNX and specifically DALI lighting control. Just to remind, next week we have a second webinar on ComfortClick, KNX and Z-Wave gateways. It will be presented by Flavia Sanchez from ComfortClick. The same day, Wednesday, but 3 p.m. start. After that, we have a few other interesting webinars. On 20th, we're going to have a Discover Fibaro Home Center 3 and Nice Gate Systems. It will be joint webinar Scott Ellard from Nice, Australia, and myself. In 3 weeks' time, we're going to have introduction to Cool Automation, and Eugene Gechtman from Cool Automation will be presenter. So that's what's coming. And today we'll be talking about KNX and DALI lighting control.
Yeah, welcome guys. Thanks for your time. This is our third or fourth one now at this stage. I'm just going to introduce DALI, ABB DALI gateways to you now. I'll keep it at a very, I'm not going to go too depth into the KNX side of it. I will show you our IBus tool, which allows us to communicate with our DALI gateway. I have one in my room here set up on the floor with a few lamps attached to it, so we'll be able to have a look and see how it works. So without much ado, I'm just going to bounce a bit through this introduction, show you some of what we have available and some of what we can do with our DALI gateway. So the agenda for this part is to look at some of the features of DALI, to look at some of the assortment and some of the newer assortments that we have of devices. We'll have a look at devices overview. We'll look at the IBus tool here in the presentation before I do a live show of it. I have it set up here on my computer. And we'll just show a few things, yeah, with the IBus tool and ETS. Okay, so the features of DALI. So DALI, I don't know how much you know about DALI, but the digital addressable lighting interface. Really, DALI came around as an evolution of lighting control systems. It's controlled to the standard 62386. It's evolved even at this stage now. The problem with DALI was when DALI was first released, it was, I won't say it was like KNX where the rules were set in stone. When you release a device, it had to comply with the rules. More so, they were guidelines. So what happened over time was that manufacturers of DALI devices tended to add features to it, tended to wander from the scope. So for people like us who are looking to control DALI lights, it gave us a lot of problems because within the DALI drivers and ballasts, they were adding features that we couldn't control and we had no idea what they were doing, and we were always playing catch up, and it created a lot of problems. So the DALI Association, in its wisdom then, came up with the new DALI 2 standard, which has just been enacted. And now, to comply with DALI 2 standard, your devices must comply with the rules and regulations. They must have a standard set of connections. And it enables us as manufacturers of DALI control devices then to be certain that whatever gateways we release into the market will control DALI 2 certified devices. I can't guarantee DALI 1 because still some of the manufacturers are doing funny things, but certainly we can guarantee that we can control all DALI 2 devices because our gateways are all certified to DALI 2. So we have DALI ballasts now for all the various different types of lights that we know. Of course, more common now are the DALI LED fittings. We have ones with RGB and white. We have multicolored ones. We have all sorts of different control available for these lights now. They're very flexible, and that's the huge advantage of a DALI system. With a hardwired system, any changes really are hard to do. You need to change your wiring. With a DALI system, it's much, much simpler. The lamps are connected in groups, so we switch those groups. So it's much easier by rearranging the groups and software to control the lighting. Generally, we will control the lamps as a single ballast, as a group, or we can do a broadcast. We might decide to broadcast to a full DALI channel, and do whatever. We might have an all on or all off. Here's the features of a DALI system. DALI system really is just a DALI bus line going to all the devices. This is sort of a typical DALI network. You have luminaires connected, you have switches connected, there's relay modules connected, there's all sorts of stuff connected to it. What we control and connect to with our ABB DALI gateway is the DALI lamps and the DALI ballasts. We don't control the DALI relays. We don't control or have anything to do with DALI presence detectors or switches or anything like that. We take all that out with our KNX control system in just to control all the DALI fittings. DALI is often used with multiple different systems, KNX being one of them. I mean, all the other systems that are out on the market have DALI interfaces and DALI gateway too. Challenges with DALI, of course, are that DALI is an old system, it's a slow system, and yeah, it's not too bad, but it does a job. It does a job that it's designed for, and it does it very, very well. Just let me go. So, what's a KNX ABB IBus DALI gateway? Well, it's the connection between our KNX network and our DALI system. So typically, as with all these gateways, KNX comes in on one side and DALI goes out on the other side. One advantage our gateways have is they also require a 240-volt connection. And the advantage of that is that you don't need a separate DALI power supply for the DALI communications. What comes out of the KNX is, comes out of our gateway is a 2-wire DALI control bus. Typically, when this is run around and wired by the electrical installer, typically they'll use a 5-core cable. You'll have 3 cores for live neutral and earth or active neutral and earth, and you will have 2 cores for the DALI plus and DALI minus. So that's typically what you see in most projects, and that's typically the way it's running around the place. Of course, there's the digital illumination interface in the DALI organization. There's lots of information available online. You can find all that wherever you need it. Don't be afraid to do a bit of Googling. There's plenty of stuff in there. And they're like KNX organizations, like all these big organizations. They have plenty of information. They actually have DALI 2 standard information. There's all products. And you can actually go into it now and you can find a list of all the certified products. All the devices and products that they have certified to the DALI 2 standard will be available there. So it's easy enough to find. Typically for lighting control, we have 4 methods to control lighting in a KNX network. The top method is, the method up the top there is using a standard switch actuator. This is used quite commonly where we just have lighting that goes on and off. We don't need any finer control on it. Typically, you might have it on stairwells, you might have it in offices, you might have it in schools, any places where we're not worried about dimming lights or controlling groups or anything like that. We're just turning bunches of lights on and off. Next to that, then, we have the universal dimmer, which is just a 230-volt dimmer sending out to a transformer or direct 230 volts out, just a phase cut dimmer feeding lights and lamps and ballasts and transformers and whatever you have out there. The third method was the old switch dim actuator, which was a 1 to 10 volt dimmer, pretty old standard, and it was around a long time, but it worked very well. It was in a lot of offices and schools again. Anywhere there was presentations and rooms needed dimmed lights, they were used quite commonly. But nowadays, it's still used, but it's dying out. I've seen, as years have gone on, I've seen less and less of that around. Everything is moving to DALI. So we have our DALI, our ABB DGS 1.64.1.1. That's one of our big selling devices. I mean, we have DALI line coming out of that, controls up to 64 devices, so it's quite commonly used in lots of installations. This was just an old slide, really. I've just thrown everything on top of it. Up to 2017. We had 5 different types of DALI gateways, but since 2017, so you will see these legacy gateways around the place, and there are plenty of installations. There was thousands of them installed. After 2017, we released the new versions. The new versions are quite a step up in technology, with the advance, and as I say to people, with the advances now in EEPROM technology, the advances in all sorts of memory and all that sort of stuff, the devices now have quite a lot of memory and processing power in them. And it's possible to develop quite complicated architecture, and you can do a lot with these devices now. The restrictions that we had in old KNX devices where there was no memory in the device are all gone. We can download what we want. The negative side of that is the application files have become quite big. So the first download to these gateways can take a little bit of time. It can take 5 to 10 minutes. It's because the application file is so big and there's so much flexibility within that file. You can download up to 1,000. There's 1,000 group objects into each of these devices, and it takes a while. It just takes ETS a while to download these. So you can see what we can do with each. The table really shows what we can do. The DALI gateway DGS81 is just a simple 8-channel device. We switch 16 devices per channel. Gives us a maximum of 128 devices. And we actually just switch per channel. It's channel on, channel off, dim up, dim down, whatever we want to do. That's how it works. Our two workhorses and my two biggest selling products are the two ones in red there, the DGS 16411 and 26411. Difference between the two is one is a single channel and the other is a dual channel. Single channel 64 DALI fittings and dual channel 64 fittings per channel gives you 128 devices. And they can be controlled in groups. They can be controlled by channel, or they can be controlled individually. Our other two DALI devices on the right-hand side is the DALI constant light controller. This device, excuse me, this device controls in 8 groups. And we can put light sensors out throughout a building. And we can use these light sensors to daylight harvest in effect. So we can dim the lights when the sun is shining, and we can save energy that way. Or we can, consequently, when it's dark, we can also brighten the lights up when it gets dark in the evenings, as it does now. The one at the end there on the right-hand side, the DLRA, he's really just a small compact version of the DALI light controller, suitable for mounting into, say, a false ceiling or something like that. So you don't have to rely on stuff coming from a central distribution board. The constant light then with these guys is the LFO light sensor, which is installed wherever you need it. However, for the newer DALI gateways, we can also use the constant light control from our presence detectors. So these presence detectors have quite good light sensors built into them, and they will measure the reflected light from the surface below them, using a bit of calibration and using a few lux meters, and taking a little bit of time to do it. You can get quite accurate lighting control onto a desktop in any office or anywhere you need it. They're quite good, and they work quite easily and quite flexibly. As I said, the DGS 164 is a DALI device with 1 channel up to 64 DALI devices. These can be grouped into 16 individual groups. You can have no overlapping groups. So if a lamp is a member of one group, it can't be a member of any other group. It just doesn't work that way. We just group them individually. And we can have up to 16 different scenes. This is really quite powerful, and generally I haven't seen any options where we need many more than that. Of course, you'll always get 1 or 2, but in general, 16 scenes is plenty for most applications. Again, the 2-channel device just is 2 channels of 64 DALI ballasts per line. Again, the same things apply. We have 16 groups and 16 scenes on each output. So in total, that gives us 32 DALI groups and 32 scenes. It's a very economical situation. This is probably one of my biggest selling devices. That and the presence detectors installed everywhere. Every office tower you see throughout any of the cities are full of these in the switchboard. We really do sell quite a lot of them. Some more specifications on the device. The device, it's a DIN rail device, mountable on and off the DIN rail without a tool. It's a spring loaded, you don't have to do anything. 4 modules wide, so it's quite neat and small compared to some other systems where you need an individual DALI power supply. With this device, you don't. You have a 230-volt connection on the bottom of it, so you don't need any external DALI power supply for the system. It's quite flexible in the voltage you can give it, 100 up to 240 volts, 50, 60 hertz. This device is sold globally, so you can see they've really put a lot of thought and effort into developing the devices. One device is sold globally. As I said, we have an integrated DALI power supply, and the DALI output is 230 volts secure. What that means is that we had a lot of people would come to us with devices that have been broken. Somebody had mistakenly connected 230 volts in onto the DALI side. So again, the boffins in the factory did a bit of work on this, and they now have 230 volt protection on the DALI side. So even if you connect 230 volts to it, it will be fine. It won't do anything to the device. The device will still work fine once you connect it properly. We now have extended DALI fault information. I'll show you this in a few minutes from the IBus tool. The IBus tool is a freely available commissioning tool that ABB have made and made available for free to everybody. You can download this tool off the websites, the www.abb.com/KNX. Just go in there and look for any of the DALI gateways. Once you find a DALI gateway, it will be in the software tab on that device. It's in there for free and it's handy. It's always being updated. When you first log onto the tool itself, you will see it'll tell you if there's updates. You can just simply click on the updates and it works quite fine. It's always adding new features, and I said it's worth keeping an eye on because it's just so handy for commissioning with DALI. I'll show you in a few minutes how that works. We have the flexible combination of DALI groups, single control or KNX groups. Don't forget, just because I talk about we only have 16 groups available on the DALI side, that doesn't mean we can't do things differently and group them on the KNX side. So, for example, I might have 4 lamps in one room controlled off group 1 on the DALI side. My second room might have another 6 lamps, so I have 10 lamps controlled in 2 individual groups on the DALI side. When I want to switch that, I will send a telegram, a KNX telegram, to the DALI gateway, telling it to switch group 1 on, group 2 on, whichever I want to do. People often say, well, what if I want a group then that encompasses both of those rooms so that I can switch them all on or off at the same time? And I say, well, that's quite simple then. You just do it on the KNX side. You use a KNX telegram connected to both groups just to switch them on and off at the same time. It's quite simple. It's once you get the hang of it and how to figure it out, it's quite simple to work out what you need. As I said, it's quite flexible. Let me see. We also support the emergency lighting converter, DALI Type 1 emergency lighting converter. I'll show you that as well. I have one connected up here. And it really makes this device quite useful. And this is one of the main selling points I have for it, is that we can use it to control standard DALI lights, which we do all over the place. And we can also use it for the emergency light system. So if I have a building with a lot of DALI emergency lights in there, we can connect this up to our DALI bus and we can interrogate these lights. We can do function tests and duration tests and battery tests. And the device, the gateway will send the appropriate telegram out to the appropriate emergency device. The device will run its tests as it does in the DALI world, and that's just what it does. And then when it's finished its test, it'll report back to the gateway. And the gateway then can report back to me with a single telegram giving me all the information for that emergency light test. It comes back in a big coded string, a 4-byte coded string. So generally what you need to do is install a head-end software system such as NetX or iSpar, where you can put in a big, or whatever you need to put in there. You can put your building layout, you can put in your alarm, your lighting test system, but you can decode these telegrams to give all the information. You can pull a report then. I can pull a report on my whole building and say, I ran the emergency light test last Friday. Here's the fittings that failed. Here's the fittings that passed. Bang, I can go back again in 6 months and do my next emergency light test. So it's very, very, very handy. And from the olden days when we used to have to send a guy around to each building at the weekend, turn off all the boards and just time the lights and see how long the battery lasted for, we don't have to do that anymore. We can do it all smarter. Other features we have with the device, we can also do manual operation on the front of the device. As you see, there's the little button sticking out in the front. You can just hold that button for, I think it's up to 3 or 4 seconds. The device switches into manual mode. Then you switch on and you switch off. It's just simple and easy to do it that way. The 2 LEDs on the front of the device also give you an indication of what's happening on the network. They will blink at different rates. The manual tells you, of course, what all the different blink rates are, but they will blink at different rates, telling you if there's problems with the DALI bus, if there's problems with the power supply. It gives you various indications to let you know that there's something happening on your DALI line, that there's something wrong. We have backwards compatibility, of course, of some of our older gateways. As this is a couple of years old, the application is still available for ETS4. There are some diehards out there still using ETS4, and not surprisingly, I had a guy phone me last week with an old project in ETS4. He wanted to convert it to ETS5. So I still get the odd call from time to time. So there are people still out there using ETS4. And also, if you're going back to an old installation, it might also be handy to have. We can also, another feature is that the devices will support long frame rates in KNX. What that means is that a typical telegram is a certain size and only gets so much information, but KNX also supports what's called a longer frame rate. So it's a longer telegram with a higher payload. And the download via the IP routers or the IP interfaces, the IPSS or the IPRS, really is a lot quicker than just downloading via a standard UPS device. First of all, you're going over IP on one side, of course, but then when it gets to the IP devices, they convert the telegrams to the long frame rate of ETS, and this really does improve it. It's about a 3 or 4 minute download, as far as I remember, straight off. It really does help, and certainly if you're on site and you have 10 or 15 of these to program for the first time, you could be there some considerable time. So this, any time we can save doing that, it's really worthwhile. The last point I have here is for DALI commissioning via the IBus tool. I mean, that's my standard. I use DALI, the IBus tool, for everything. I'll show you this later. Here, as before, is our standard connection diagram for the device. You can see our live neutral in the bottom, KNX going in this side. We have our standard label carrier. We have our KNX programming button and LED here. And then we have our two DALI channels here. Yeah, that's typical for all of our devices. This is just the way it is. It's typical layout. Here's my IBus tool, standard for diagnostic tools for it. Typically, we'll have the checkerboard, and on the checkerboard, you will see all the DALI devices 1 to 64. It's a very easy tool to use. I'll show you again in a few minutes. When we first connect it to our line, it'll poll the DALI gateway, which then will, in turn will poll the DALI line, and it will come back and report back all devices that are connected to the system. And it'll give us plenty of information about that system. Then you see down here, you can't really see it here. I'll show you better in a few minutes, but you see how we can get information straight away by just connecting straight to our gateway, and we can get all the information from that gateway. So for commissioning, it really does make things handy. Again, we have the different functions in the DALI tool. We can look at the lamps. We can see how they switched on and off. We can look at groups. We can look at our DALI lines. We can actually do burn-in. We can do burn-in for our fluorescent lamps. I mean, fluorescent lamps should not be dimmed in the first few thousand hours. Certainly for the T5s and all that. They do need a bit of burn-in time, so as all the gas is ignited in the lamp before we start dimming them. So we can allocate a burn-in time, and we can say stop dimming within the burning time. We have other status of forced operation, we have blocking, we have staircase functionality. We can see if this is all operative just by looking at the DALI tool. So this is very, very, very handy. And also we can look at the emergency lights. We can really go into this comprehensively and look at each emergency light, see is it working. We can get all the information we need from the emergency lights. The application, as I said, the ETS application is available for both ETS4 and ETS5. One thing that we have done with this now, as we've developed, and this is a developing thing that's happening with more and more of our devices, is that there are now templates available. So I can create a template. I can create a template for a group, and I can say, I want this group to dim on at such a rate, to dim off at such a rate. I wanted to do this functionality. I can set that as a template. And then I can allocate groups to either use that template, or I can decide I don't want to use a template. I want to do a different feature myself. So the handiness of this is that it speeds up programming commissioning for the installer. We can define these templates, and if we're in a big open plan office, all of our groups can be controlled the same way. We can set one template, and that's all our groups set up. So up to 16 groups, then it's saving us time and doing all that sort of stuff. So you can see what we can do here. We can set parameters, we can set status functions, special functions, master slave dimming. We can do all these just setting the template. It really, really speeds up programming rather than have to go through each individual ballast. Remember, there's 64 ballasts connected to the single channel device, and there's 128 connected to the dual channel device. So really, by doing this, you can save an awful lot of time. And again, in the application, you can play with the various. You can have the switch on speed, you can have the switch off speed, you can vary all these. As I always say, when I walk into a room, I like the lights to come on quickly. I don't want a light dimming on slowly, so I want a light to come on within a second when I come into a room. However, when I'm leaving a room, I'm quite happy to turn off the light and let the light switch itself off over 5 seconds, and it creates a nice effect, and you can create some nice effects in a room by doing this. And I suppose for the end user, they see the value of what they've installed, and they get nice switch on fast, switch off slow. They get all this sort of stuff. Another advantage of switching off slow, of course, is if the presence detector hasn't seen you in the room, you can run around the room then, you're not in the dark, and you can reactivate the presence detector. It only happens sometimes. We can also query the lamps and the ballasts. We can find out what information it has. We can switch automatic DALI addressing on and off. Generally, I'd say switch it off and handle that manually yourself. It's probably quicker to do it. Another interesting setting in here is the pause between DALI queries. I've seen a couple of jobs, not many, a couple of jobs where we query a lamp fitting. The way DALI works is that DALI is constantly polling the DALI line. It'll poll every device one after the other. First of all, it polls the status. Do you exist? If you exist, then tell me are you turned on or off or what level you're at. So it will constantly poll the whole network. And what we found in a few instances was that at the standard time, sometimes there was issues and there was problems. Again, this was probably down to the DALI ballast manufacturer. But what we were able to do now is we can slow down those queries so we get less errors when we're communicating on the DALI bus. Again, in the application, as I said, we have plenty of group adjacent group objects. You can see the single channel device has over 1,000 group objects, and the 2-channel device has 2,000 group objects with up to 4,000 possible group addresses. So there's an awful lot of programming you can put into these guys if you want. I would say don't do it, certainly. I would try and make it easier rather than make it harder. But if you want to do it, it's all there. I have had guys that'll do it. They'll open everything in the device. They'll open all the parameters and they'll go and program everything they can. But certainly that's down by choice. However, you will get total control. You will be able to do anything you want with the system. The downside is that the commissioning time will increase exponentially. And not only that, you're more likely to have problems and make mistakes. I mean, we're not all perfect, but sometimes I do make a mistake. Here's from the DALI side. Here's how we can set up our groupings. So you can see in this instance, I have a DALI gateway DGS164. If you can see there, you can see the solid lines, and the solid lines are single control. So I've taken these ballasts and I'm just controlling them on and off, switching them like that. So if I want to do a group control and using KNX, I can just connect a KNX group address to various group objects and switch them on individually and however I want. The advantage to this is that we have great flexibility setting these groups up in KNX. We're not stuck and we're not limited to 16. However, there's a few drawbacks. One of the drawbacks is that the way DALI works as a slow bus is that we send a telegram to switch a light on. Then we have to send the next telegram to switch the next light on. Then we have to send a telegram to for the next light. And we have to do that for 64 lights. So in effect, if you have a large room with up to 64 fittings, they get what we call the Mexican wave, where, you know, around the footy stadiums, you see fans getting bored and doing a Mexican wave, but you'll get the same sort of effect turning these DALI groups on via KNX, because it's just the nature of the beast. We just have to pole one lamp, then the next lamp, then the next lamp, then the next lamp, on quite a slow bus. So if we have a 2-channel device, it can be quite slow, and it can take up to, I think it's up to 5 seconds to turn all the lights on. So yeah, on one side we have flexibility for every light. However, on the other side, we may have an issue with these lights switching on in the Mexican wave style. If we control them in DALI groups, we lose some of that flexibility. However, what we now have is that I send one telegram to the gateway, and the DALI groupings are stored in the ballasts. So in effect, what I can do is I can say turn group 2 off, or group 2 on, for example. My DALI gateway sends a telegram out onto the DALI bus. Group 2, please turn on. So all the ballasts will hear this, and any ballast that's assigned to group 2 will turn on immediately. So that's an advantage of this side, is you can turn groups on and off very fast. You don't have the Mexican wave that you'll get with the KNX grouping. However, you're limited to 16 groups. That's the downside. So it's just one thing to be aware of. It's a simpler, easier way to control the lights. It's a lot less programming. We can set templates up. Each of these groups can follow a certain template. And once that works, we'll have a program very, very quickly. Emergency light converters. We can connect all these you see here. We have emergency lights connected up to our system. They're very easy. We can connect an emergency light to our system, and like I said, we just set it up, and we can control the testing, we can control the results, we can take all that information from the devices. One thing to be careful of, I know what some people do nowadays, is when there are no lamps on in the installation, let's turn off the power to all the ballasts. So as you see this system here wired, we are going to turn off the power to all of these ballasts. And of course, what happens with an emergency light when you kill its power? Well, of course, you're going to get the emergency fitting come on. So just be aware of that as well. Some people, I've seen that mistake made, where it's expensive then to go and get it rewired, and, you know, cause a bit of grief and time. Yeah, oh, sorry, I think that's the same slide again, is it? Yeah, we'll skip through that one. So typically, as I said, when we have the emergency lighting converter, we will need a PC screen to pull back the information on. The gateway will test a lamp. The gateway then will get a telegram back from the lamp telling us the status of the test. Has the test passed? Has the test failed? Is the fitting okay? I get that information back, then I have to decode it and visualize it. What happens then is the next fitting that finishes its test, it reports back to the gateway reports back to the visualization again. So the gateway does not have a database and does not store all this information. The gateway just has the information from the last telegram it received. So very often, if we've had 2 or 3 fittings have finished and I haven't had my PC switched on, we're going to miss the information for that. I did see a job a few years back where we did it in a dairy. We did all the emergency lighting, and the PC for visualization was set up in the manager's office. However, he didn't like where it was. It was taking up too much space on his desk, so he powered it off and he stuck it away in the cupboard and never looked at the PC again. And then 6 months later, we got complaints from him that he wasn't getting any of his emergency light testing reports. And lo and behold, when we went to investigate, what we found was the PC was in the cupboard, powered down, and not even connected to the system. So The visualization system is very important in the database here. It needs to be kept up to date and monitored. As I said about single and group control, we can mix DALI group control, we can mix single lamp control, we can mix, it's up to us what way we want to mix the system. If we're in a big office, we can take all sorts of, generally if you're in a big open plan office and you have 64 fittings, they're all on and all off at the same time, or you might break them down into a couple of zones. But if you're in an office with a load of smaller meeting rooms or something like that, you need to go around them, it may be more beneficial to program these in various groups, with KNX groups, with individual fittings, with DALI groups. You can arrange these however you want. It's the flexibility that's the bonus here. We have the options to do whatever we like, and we certainly can maximize our efficiency for any project. Again, with a 2-channel device, we double up what we can do. However, we also have the option here for a KNX group to cross DALI lines. Remember, when I talk about a KNX group, I'm talking about a KNX telegram hitting the DALI gateway and the DALI gateway turning on and off fittings and DALI groups as per instruction. Now, if I make that one telegram turn off multiple groups across multiple lines, it doesn't matter. It's still just one telegram. And again, it's a highly efficient way for, say, an all-on or an all-off signal to be commissioned. Works excellently in most cases. And again, if we've multiple DALI gateways throughout the whole system, we could connect one all-off telegram to every group and every fitting. Doesn't take long to do, easily configurable, and it gives a lot of control throughout a building. And coming up to the end now, just a couple more slides, and then I'll show you the IBus tool. In this instance now, I'm just showing www.abb.com, as usual, /KNX. Drops you straight onto our KNX homepage. Look under lighting control, and you'll find both DALI gateways in there. There is a new premium version of these guys being released. It's due out next month. There's more features and there's more stuff available with it. We'll look at that another time. This is basic at the moment, but certainly any of the information you need for the DALI gateways is in here on this page. When you first land in here, you'll be on the data sheet and you'll have the technical data sheet for the device, but you click on the documentation side of it and you will have every bit of information you need. You'll have the manual, the software, the IBus tool, etc. There's plenty of stuff in there to keep you busy. That's all I have on the presentation. Now, what I'd like to show you, I won't take any questions out. I'll wait till we get further. But what I want to do now is I want to share my screen and share this screen with you. Now you can see me connected to my IBus tool. You can see I have version 1.9.40 of my IBus tool. I'm on the home page of it. What I can do is I have a DALI gateway here set up beside me, and I've given him the address 1.1.120. It's just a random address. He's just sitting in a box here behind me. So I can go and discover on the line. I can scan the line if I want. I can connect. I can use Connection Manager. I can set up how am I going to connect to the device. Am I going to connect over IP? Am I going to connect via USB? How am I going to connect? This stage I'm connected over IP. You see my IP address down here in the corner. So I have this device and I know this, so I can just connect straight to this device. And it's programmed. I don't know what program's in it at this stage. I programmed it many months ago, and it's one of these ones I use for testing. Somebody sends me an application they're having problems with, and I can just connect it up here, download an application and see what happens to it. So very often I mess with this device here and just try and figure out what's happening for people. But you can see when I try and connect it to the device, the first thing the IBus tool is it queries the device and gets all the information. Yeah. So you can see I have my little test kit here. I have 13 DALI devices connected to this test kit. It's only a little box. They're small little LEDs, so everything's fine. It's handy. None of them are monitored at the moment. I have no lamp faults or ballast faults, but I can simulate that. I have a switch down here if I really reach down to it. And I will get lamp faults on one of my lamps now. And you can see it took a couple of seconds for them to come through. And again, that's because of the sequence of the DALI network. The DALI network works by the DALI gateway, polls each device individually to check. Even if it knows there's only 13 devices there, it is still going to poll all 64 and ask, are you okay? Are you alive? Are you okay? Are you alive? Are you okay? And it will poll through all these. Now, if I reset that error, you can see it still takes a few seconds now for it to come back because that polling is going on in the background, and it will come back and it will fix. There you go, it's fixed now. So you can see how the DALI network works, and there's a bit of a delay on the network and how it works. So it's a 2-channel device I have here. I've only anything connected to channel A at the moment. When I select a device, you'll see what this means in a minute, but when I select a device, it'll turn on at 80%, and when I've unselected it, it's 2%. I'll show you what that means in a minute. We can see the power supply to the gateway is fine. We're not locked, and manual isn't operative. If we want, we can generate a report in HTML or text file. It'll create a DALI report of what's connected to the lines. Yeah, it'll go out and it'll just query every fitting as per usual with DALI. Queries every line, has a look at every line. Whatever it finds, it'll come back and report back to us. So here's my DALI checkerboard. You can see there's lots of information. It comes back to me now. These lights are all on. Yeah, these are off. These are on. I look behind me. Sorry, you can't see it there, but I have them. I've also connected up one emergency light fitting here to see, just to show you what happens with an emergency light fitting. Currently, you can see I've lost a bit of information off the bottom, but no worries. There's a slider here to get me more. So I can look and see what all the different, here's all the different information I can get off these icons here. You can see it gives you nice newsy, it's easy. Yeah, nice user-friendly, easy. I can look at the automatic DALI addressing. I can look at all what's happening on my DALI gateway. Very often, if somebody has replaced a lamp fitting, if you've replaced, for instance, the DALI gateway and reprogrammed it, you will see a conflict in the DALI groups here. Yeah. And if I have a conflict, I then have the option. I can use the gateway values, i.e. the values that are in the gateway, and they will be forced out to the DALI network. Or I can use the DALI devices. Yeah. So if I put a new DALI gateway in here, I will use the DALI devices, suck the information from the DALI devices and use them. And then I know my gateway groupings will all be set up correctly. What I can do here is, you can see I have the groups here. Here's all my group definitions. And here's all my individual ballasts. So when I go in here and I want to do something, I can do that. Configuration mode stops me doing that, you know? That's just here just to stop us doing anything silly when we first click in here. We can't do anything till we unlock it. Tool interferes with the existing installation. Make sure security measures. Okay, I have it here on my desk. But if you're in an office block, you never know what you're going to interfere with. You just want to check first before you do anything. So at the moment, I can see group 1 is those lights. So when I select the group here, all the other lights will go off, and just group 1 is illuminated behind me nice and brightly. I can select group 2. Group 2 is selected nicely, and I can select group 3. Group 3 is selected nicely. When I select out of there, all my lights go off behind me. Let me just trigger my errors again. Am I monitoring that? Probably. Yeah, there you go. So I've disabled those on that. I have little micro switches here. I can just disable. So quickly you can see if there's an error on the DALI line, if there's an error with the ballast, there's an error with the fitting. But these little micro switches here just have little errors gone up so I can see, just simulate something going into fault. And now they're back again. I want to readdress this fitting. Say this fitting is in the wrong place and I want to readdress him. So we know he's currently DALI address 12. I can just drag him. Now he's DALI address 14. It's as simple as that. So this DALI address 4 might want to be DALI address 32. You know, if you go into a big open plan office, when the DALI line first boots up, the DALI addresses will just randomly address themselves throughout the whole system. And you might want to tidy this up and make this neat. And this gives you the opportunity. I can drag and drop these fittings wherever I want. And what happens is the device, you can see it's constantly scrolling here and sending telegrams and querying the line. it will send out the new DALI addresses to these ballasts as we drag and drop them. So no matter how I do them, it does it. Yeah? And I'm guaranteed to work. If I have a group here, this group, for example, all these lamps are part of this group. We can see there's a little minus here. I don't know if you can see it, but it's a little minus. I can minus that, minus that. So now when I go back into that group, only those two lamps are part of the group. Yeah. I can take this group and I can say, okay, I want to make this guy part of this group. I can say this group, let's put him into that group. Yeah, I can switch them any way I want. So as I said very much earlier on, DALI gives you the flexibility in an office. You know, partition walls go up, partition walls go down, all that sort of stuff. Just by logging onto the system here, you can quickly change and readdress all the DALI ballasts. Once you've done that then, bingo, you've no rewiring to do. You can just allocate them to different groups. And you can then you've changed your fitting, you've changed your network, everything's sorted. There's never any problem with it. So that's just the simple side of this, how we can work. It's really quite a handy tool. You have it for the two outputs here. The overview just gives us an overview of the lines. Yeah, here's what they're all at. Yeah, so it knows that this ballast is an emergency light. I can, for example, here's the status of the groups that are on top. Yeah, so they're all switched on 2%, 2%, 80%. Remember back at the very start, I showed you on the general tab, 80% is on, 2% is off. So that's just when I'm testing here. If I walk into a room and I write, I want this guy to go to 50%. I can write that, and that lamp will then go to 50%. It should do. Yeah, there he goes. Just wait a second or two for the feedback from the device, and there he goes. If I want to switch him off, I can switch him off. Again, there he goes. He just scrolls down to off. Yeah, you see these guys turning off as they turn off. Yeah. So whatever's in the group, if I turn off the groups, it'll turn off the appropriate lamps in the groups. Yeah, they're all back to 2%. Yeah, you can see what happens with them. So I can do all sorts of things with the various lamps here. But what this enables me to do is to test in my network. I can test in my network. I can say, I want to test this light, turn it on, turn it off. I want to test here. Whatever I want to do, I have full flexibility here to test the devices. Details. I can select any of my fittings. Yeah. Just another window to play with the devices. I can look at the status. The status is off. I can turn it on. And it will report back to me. Once it comes on, I can see it switching on behind me. And there it is switching on. I can switch it off. And the fitting will switch itself off. The group, sorry, because I'm connected to the group. The group here will switch off. You can see it just slowly ramping down. Depends on the ramp time. This is what I said earlier. When I walk into a room, I want the lights to come on fast. When I walk out of a room, nice effect to dim them off slowly. I also have the choice here. I can set them here to, I don't know, 50, 60%, whatever I want. The lights come on behind me to 60%. So you can see how I can test all of these functions, and I can look at each group and see what's active and what's inactive. I can look at each one individually. And the last thing I want to show you now is the emergency lights. So the emergency lights, here's what we've detected, yeah? So emergency level, when there's a power failure, switch the light on at 100%. Auto test is possible. Battery capacity, okay, we're not getting an answer back from that. And I'll tell you the reason for that is because I have a battery that I plug in here once in a blue moon, and it's usually totally discharged. I've been told it takes 24 hours to get a full charge back into it, so I ain't plugging it in for 24 hours. But we can see the last test performed is a function test. There's no tests running. It passed the function test. Yeah, we can select what test we want. I might want a battery test. So I'll say start battery test. And it goes off. So the battery's at 0%, yeah. Battery test, status is idle. It passed the test. Now the battery, like I said, the battery has been sitting here probably in a box for the last 6 months. Hasn't been plugged to any power supply, so it's just drained away over the last 6 months. But you can see, I just need to minimize that slightly. You can see all the rest of the information. We've no lamp failure. There's no problem with it. I can do, if I want to do, I can do a full duration test. I wouldn't recommend it. The duration test is, you know, these emergency lights now, they only have a low wattage LED in them, so batteries can last for 24 hours in these, and you never, you're going to be sitting there for hours waiting for that to reply. Possibly you can do a partial duration test, but certainly functional test proves the device, and the battery test proves that the battery is okay as well. So generally, they're the ones that you can do from here, and you can do quite quickly. You can see he'll reply to me now. There he is. Idle. Didn't pass because I know why it didn't pass, because my battery is on 0. The battery is, it just needs to charge itself up for a day or two. So that's just a quick overview of what you can see here in the DALI gateway and all the information you can get for the system. It's quite handy and it's quite simple to use. It's quite intuitive. Play with it for 5 minutes and most people have it figured out. Just a little bit more on the IBus tool. I can disconnect now by going back. I can go into demo mode, and for any of these devices, I can go into demo mode and play with them. I don't have to have a device connected. I can go in and I can demo all the bits and pieces and functionalities that are available for these devices. Yeah. And for IP devices, any IP devices on the network, it will pick up. So you can see it's picked up these 2 devices that are on my home network here. I have the IP router, which I'm connected to the system through, and I have an application controller connected here as well. So you can see also the status for some of these devices. Are they up to date? We can get all sorts of information here. For the application controller indeed, I can click here and open its website. So for some of the devices that have built-in web servers, I can connect here, and I don't need to get onto the network and find out what the IP address is. I can just go straight and open the website straight from here. So that's in the section. So the other 2 really, supported devices, just give you a list of supported devices, and SBuses from the alarm systems, just giving you information about that. So yeah, I can go back to the home page, and I'm back to here. There's tools up to date. There's no firmware updates. You push messages here every now and then. So yeah, it's a handy tool. Gives you lots of information about this network. Yeah. Settings, presentation language, it's all just general information you have on the device. But this is the main tool you would use or should use for connecting to the KNX network. Just be aware, sometimes you get away with it, but if you have this running connected to the network, and you also have ETS connected to the network, you can get conflict between the 2 of them because they'll try and use the same driver. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Don't know whether it's my corporate laptop or it's an IT thing with corporate have my laptop locked into the heck. But yeah, you can get an awful lot with it. Yeah, let me show you again. I mean, it's really, when I want to DALI address a fitting, like I said, I connect to the device. We pull the information from the device. So when I power up a DALI fitting, the DALI fitting will auto address itself first, just to give itself, because you'll have 50 fittings or whatever online. So it decides to give itself usually they're auto addressing enabled, and they will just give themselves an address. So they'll just randomly address themselves between 1 and 64. They'll check and see is there any conflicts. If there is, you know, they'll shift themselves around. But certainly on a DALI line, once they've auto addressed themselves and I connect to it, like I said, I can go in here and this will be filled out. If you filled your office with 32 lights, it'll randomly have them all over the place, you know. They mightn't be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 all the way nicely. And certainly you could have 17, you might have a 20, you might have a 50, you might have a 40, they will just randomly address themselves. So to make that neat, for example, for your training room, you might say, okay, that lamp addressed itself to there, they all address. So when they randomly address themselves, they might be all over the place. So you might say, in your training room, I have 4 lights. So that's light 1, that's light 2, that's light 3, and that's light 4. So that then will automatically give them a DALI address. That's the addressing done. You don't have to do anything else. I'm not sure. They're 2 different tools. ETS is used for programming the devices, programming the KNX side. Whereas the IBus tool is really used as a commissioning tool to identify the DALI fittings, to commission the DALI fittings, to address the DALI fittings, and for all that sort of stuff. So they're really two different tools. This is a commissioning tool. ETS is a programming tool for the setup.
So you need to have two, I understand.
Yes. I mean, you're going to do all the group addressing and device addressing and parameter setting, and all that stuff is done in ETS. No, I'm not using ETS5 at all. I'm using the IBus tool.
Mm-hmm.
So let me start ETS. I'll just have a quick show now. No, I mean, ETS5 is used to program the DALI gateway. IBus tool is used to configure the DALI fittings and to commission the DALI fittings. So they're two separate things. So there we go. At last it opened. So let me open a new project here and I'll quickly show you. So my topology, I'll add in a DALI gateway. Add device. So I'm just going to add a DALI gateway. I know the DGS. So I will add, say, is there new versions? Oh, I shouldn't have done that, should I? So always look for the one that's the latest version. Yeah, that's the latest version. I'll drag them and drop them onto my line. You wouldn't think that I actually have a fast laptop. The problem I have is it's compromised by all the security features that are on it. So if you remember last week, I mean, two of the important things we have to do is we have to download the DALI address. Yeah. So here's what I can do actually, because I have one connected behind me. So what I can do is, first thing I'm going to do is I'll give him an address. I know the one I have is 120. I'm going to change it to, let me change it to 130. Then I know. So my device address is now 130. I can download individual address. And it'll ask me now to press the programming button on the device. So I can just press that programming button. And it should connect and program the individual. Downloading address. Done. So now, if I look back at my line, I did talk about these green ticks last week when I was talking about ETS. You can see I have addressed the device and it has a config. So in ETS now, which screen do I look at? In ETS now, you can see I can control groups. I can control group 1 status. I have group 1 switching, group 1 relative dimming, group 1 brightness value. So I can send those values. I can connect a KNX Telegram to this, link with. Let's create a new one and let's call it 1/1/1. I'll call it group 1 brightness value. Yep. On the other side of that, I'll connect it to a switch or a screen or whatever. And then when I send a telegram to that device, that group 1, which I have already defined, is going to come on at whatever, 30%, 20%, 10%. So you can say I can control the whole line. I can switch output A on. So every group, every ballast connected to line 1 is going to come on. I can do values. I can do dimming. I can monitor DALI addresses. So you can see here is where I'm going to program KNX as to how I work it. And like I said, there are plenty of connections here to get right and get wrong. Look at all that now. That's a lot of connections just for 2 lines, just with 16 groups per line. If I want to take it into individual devices, that's going to blow out very quickly because I will have all those settings. I will have those there too. I'll have 4 connections for every lamp that I connect to if I do it individually. So if I have 64 devices on a line, that's a lot of fittings to connect together. So it's quicker to do this way. So in ETS now, I am going to program the system to work how I want it to work. So all I'm doing from the KNX side is I'll connect it to a switch, I'll connect it to a screen, I'll connect it to whatever I have out there to drive those telegrams. I might connect it to my iPad. I will come in, my iPad will send group address 111, will send a brightness value to that group. That group will come out to 50% or whatever I send to it. I might send 20%, 30%. It might be presentation mode. I might send it the presentation mode or movie mode or relaxing mode. You know, might want it at 100% or 20%, 10%, or I might just turn it off. Whatever I want to do. So in ETS, I'm programming the DALI gateway to work how I want it to work. When I go to the IBus tool, I'm setting the IBus tool to define on the DALI network side, I'm defining the groups. I'm defining what lamps are in group 1, group 2, group 3, and group 4. That's where I will do it. I'll do it in the IBus tool. And using the two pieces of software, they both have different jobs, but using this programs the KNX side, and using the IBus tool then allows me to connect to the DALI gateway and program the DALI ballasts themselves, program the group addresses, program the lamp addresses, and program all that stuff into the DALI ballasts themselves. So it's an important difference between them. I don't think so. I think it needs a Windows machine. You know, you need a Windows machine. I mean, laptops nowadays are small enough that you can carry them around. And once if you're wirelessly connected to an IP router, you can walk around an office quite comfortably. And that's what many guys do. I know guys that generally they have a little test kit, and in their test kit they'll have an IP router. They'll have a router, an IP router, and they'll connect that onto the KNX line they're working on. So that gives them then range of 30, 40, 50 meters walking around the place with their laptop. They just hold a laptop in the hand and they'll walk around configuring and programming from wherever they're standing, you know. So I wouldn't advise, I don't think, maybe a Microsoft Surface will get away with it, but I don't think it'll run any of the machines. Our DALI gateways only support one master. They do not support multi-master in what they call multi-master in DALI world. No.
So there would be a constant conflict, or it may cause some conflict on the bus?
It could cause havoc because I might think lights are on when they're off, etc., etc. So, you know, I could walk into a room with a presence detector and something else is overridden that, or I just can't confirm what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen, so we don't support it.
Thank you very much for this presentation, and thank you for participating, all people on the call. Thank you.
Thank you, guys, and we'll talk again.